Hello, hello, my friends. Amy R. here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my face and my card making space. And a couple cards using some of the newest Honeybee stamps release. Their May 2025 release just went live the other day. It's called Cottage Countryside. A lot of sort of like vintagey elements to it. I'll have a link to the release in the description box below the video. You can check it all out. There's a lot of good things. And yeah, made a couple cards with some of the elements. Everything I used, as always, will also be listed and linked in the description box below the video. My links are affiliate links. That just means that if you click on one of my links and end up placing an order, I do get a little kickback from that at no extra cost to you. That is what helps pay the bills, keeps the channel going, etc. And yeah, let's get into making these cards. So I use the new Lovely Layers Ginger Jars wafer die set. In the end screen at the very end of the video, I will link to my playlist that I have of a ton of videos I've done over the years using various Lovely Layers sets from Honeybee. So this one I die cut twice from some smooth white cardstock, because why not? And then I'm using the Ginger Jar Details stencil set that you can use to add all of these different like patterns and whatnot to these jars. Another option would be to die cut them from pattern paper. I thought about it, but I really wanted to use the stencil set. And just a note, this first little bit I'm using, I didn't realize till later that the portion, like the pattern at the top of the stencil, layers with that one. I will get to it later on because I realized it later on. I was like, that's why it looked sort of funny. So anyway, I stuck the die cut pieces to a grip mat, and I'm using a trio of inks from Altenew from the Glacier Caves quad. I'm using the three darker shades, so the lightest shade I didn't use to make these cards. And then I'm just choosing the patterns and blending these three different shades of blue on top of it. And I for whatever reason, I don't know why, I don't reach for blue very often when I'm creating. Like, it's one thing if it's like an element, but not as like the main color, which is funny because I love blue. It's just, I have to make like a conscious effort to use it. I don't know why that is. But while I was doing this, I was like, oh, the color combos you could go with. You know, these would look gorgeous. These would look gorgeous in reds. Really, any color combo. You know, the sky's the limit. Why not? But I went with the blues. They were fun. So I blended on the patterns, and then the little detail portions for the lids, I just had run those through with my little tiny scraps of some gold matte cardstock. This is exactly what I'm referring to when I say I keep all the little bits of my specialty papers exactly for things like that, like the random little scraps that normally most people I think would toss. I keep them because then I can run them through, and that's exactly what I used, the tiny little ridiculous scraps, and die cut these little pieces, the little border and the like topper from the gold cardstock, and adhere those into place. And then to give these jars a bit more like depth, I used Copic markers. Any alcohol markers will work. I used Copics, and then I just went with neutral grays. Any grays would work. The warm grays, the cool grays, whatever. I just grabbed the neutral grays. This is the same thing that I show when I do like paper piecing, when I use, pattern paper to add a bit more depth and to make things like fit together a bit more. This time I just used the Copics to just give a little more dimension so that the jars don't look quite so flat. And I went with my darkest shade just right around the very edge, and then the middle shade, so I did like N4 right around the very edges of these, and then I went in with N2, then I'll do N0 just to like blend everything so I don't have like really harsh lines, and then I take my colorless blender and blend right over that. And these inks are just dye-based inks and they don't smear. Like, I didn't even really think about it, but I thought I would mention it as one, you can see it literally, that the inks aren't smearing. So that is always something to keep in mind and it's another thing to test out. Like, if you're using a different type of ink or a different brand or whatever, and you want to do something similar, and you're not sure, just test it out. stamp or stencil a little bit of the ink onto a scrap of paper, let it dry, and then go over it with your alcohol markers and see what happens. Like a lot of inks, like just our regular stamping inks, most of them should be fine, but it's always worth testing out, just in case. So these ones are fine. I even used the darkest one on the lids just very lightly, again, just to add that little tiny bit of like depth to them. So I just went along and just kind of scrolled that along the side. As usual, I'm not following any sort of like light source concept or anything. I just stick it on wherever I think it's going to look good. And then once all of that was done with the Copic markers, I then adhered the lids to their jars. And it was right after this that I was like, oh, that's why the darkest blue shade one looks weird. I was like, oh, the stencil like matches up. So I'm going to just go over it with the other portion of that stencil to fill in that pattern. So I just stuck those back to the sticky mat, lined up the stencil. Yeah, it was when I was wiping out the stencil that I was like, oh, that's what it's meant to be. So went back in with the same color blending brushes and just blended that on. And then it finishes off the jar. Love it. Which, of course, you could also go in with a different shade, to really bring in, some color. But I just went in samesies. Because, yeah, blue mood. Who'd have thunk? So once I've got that blended on, I'm then going to work on my like card front panel. So I've got some blue cardstock. I'm pretty sure this is Harbor from Concord and Ninth. I just grabbed blue from my stash that just went with everything else. So laid down my panels. These are A2 size panels, so 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. And I'm using the Floral Mosaic layering stencil set. Not going in order. With one like this, it honestly kind of doesn't matter. The stencils do say along the top, layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, layer 4, but yeah, I just was doing my own thing. So anyway, over the cardstock and the stencils, I'm using the exact same inks. Just going in, doing my thing. Not worried about the center area. That's why I didn't blend it very well. It's going to get covered up, but it's still just habit to blend over the whole thing. I still struggle with that. It's like I literally had a plan. Like I am going to cover the center of these panels with another piece of cardstock. Didn't stop me from blending. It was like the pattern must be completed. It has to be done. So went in with the next layer and I did the second darkest shade of blue. And then I'll go in with the third stencil with the like lightest shade that I was using, which was the Caribbean Sky. And yeah, like with this stencil set, like I said, it doesn't matter really what layer you go. It just kind of depends on what colors you want to use. But everything lines up to like form the pattern. So yeah, it doesn't matter. So went in with this one. And then the final layer, I went back to the sapphire shade, like the darkest blue shade. I did also think about using like white pigment ink. That would look really fun too on this. But yeah. I do like this blue shade. It's gorgeous. Like I do. I love blue. I just avoid it for whatever bizarre reason and have like forever. Anyway. Blended on this final layer and I did all of this twice. I just didn't bother filming the other one because it's the exact same thing. And again, couldn't resist adding ink to those center flowers of the design, full well knowing that none of that is going to be seen at all, but whatever. So blended that on, and then I've got those background panels. And then for my sentiments, I'm using sentiments from the So Special set. And I use this VersaFine Clear ink. I don't have a link for this. This is the Bluebells color of VersaFine Clear ink. Yeah, the detail, fabulous. Although I could have stamped that with the sapphire ink that I use for the blending. That would have worked perfectly fine. I have all these inks and trying to make a point of using them. So I stamped the sentiment onto the like some scraps of white cardstock and then used the coordinating wafer die to die cut them. And then also die cut a few more layers from scrap cardstock to layer together with the sentiments just to give them a little more depth and dimension. And then I used a rounded rectangle wafer die. Apologies, I also don't have a link for this one. The set I used was discontinued, but you could also like just trim down a piece of white cardstock, use a corner rounder punch like we used to do back in the day, you know, when we didn't have all the accessories that we've got now. So I used a rounded rectangle wafer die for the white cardstock panel just to kind of frame up those jars. Adhered those with Big Mama craft tape or foam tape, and did the same thing with the jars just to build up that bit of dimension. And then once I had those adhered into place, I put them in my splat box to add some splatter, because these need some gold splatter, in my opinion. So got those in the splat box, got my gold splatter, and then splattered that on with my fan brush. And then once I was happy with how much I had on there, which always takes me a minute, it's like, is there ever too much? Not usually. Not for me, anyway. Let that dry. Once that was dry, then I adhered the sentiments that I had stacked with the extra layers that I had die cut. So this just saved me from having to like mask off the sentiment. It's like I just left it off till the splatter was done, fully dry. Then I could adhere the sentiment into place. So got that popped into place. And then on the inside of the cards, I used the new Ornate Ginger Jar stamp set. This is a red rubber on cling foam set because Honeybee's been doing a few of these just here and there throughout some of their releases. The detail on this is something else. It's a gorgeous set. I had a hard time like planning these cards because it was like, I want to use the stamp set, but then I want to use the Lovely Layers, wafer dies, and stencil. I was like, there were so many options, and I was like, what? So I compromised by using the stamp on the inside of the cards just to finish it off, you know? So I chose the one jar, and I inked it up with the Caribbean Sky ink. Is that the one I used, or did I use a Persian? I don't even know. I'm past that point in the editing, but the detail is beautiful. So I stamped that onto the insides of the cards. My cards are top folding A2 white note cards, so 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. Once I had the jar stamped on the inside, I took another sentiment from that So Special stamp set, and I stamped that with that VersaFine Claire Bluebells ink on the inside. Again, could have stamped it with the sapphire ink. It would have looked just as fabulous. So stamped that onto the inside of my cards. So that finished off the inside. And then I adhered the card fronts to the card bases just with my craft tacky glue. And then as my final embellishment, I pulled out some self-adhesive pearls. I don't have the new ones. There was a couple embellishment packs that were part of this release that kind of, you know, match with everything. I don't have those. So I just dug through my stash until I found a pack that had kind of like royal blue pearls. So this Ocean Waves pack had the right color. So I just used those. And they're peel and stick. So peeled them off with my little craft pick there. Stuck them onto the different areas of the cards. And that finished them off. So we've got all of this pattern and these shades of blue. This was refreshing. For me, it's just, I don't know, it's funny that something like just a blue color combo is such a step out of the box for me, but it is. And I enjoyed it. It was fun. So, like I mentioned in the intro, I'll have links to all the things in the description box below. And then I'll have that link to my Lovely Layers playlist at the very end in the end screen if you want to check that out. Thank you all so very much for hanging out with me, for thumbs upping and commenting. I very much appreciate it. And I'll see you all very soon in the next one. Bye. Thank you so much to my amazing Patreon supporters. For anyone that might be interested in joining my Patreon community and supporting me, the link to my Patreon is in the description box below the video. For everyone else, as always, thank you all so much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping, commenting, subscribe if you haven't, I'd love to have you. And here's a couple other videos for you to check out in case you missed them. Bye!